सहनाववतु सहनौ भुनक्तु सह वीर्यं करवावहै तेजस्विनावधीतमस्तु मा विद्विषावहै। ॐ शान्ति शान्ति शान्तिः. Good morning, good evening, good afternoon, and welcome. This is a special session today, and I turn it over to you, Vivek, to introduce Dr. Dave, and then go through with your talk as well after that.
Excellent. Thank you very much. Happy New Year to everybody. This is our first session today. I'm first going to introduce the group to Dave. Dave, we're a non-serious group of college friends from about 30 years back, discussing serious matters. Rajesh started this group about nearly 4 or 5 years back, first with meditation, then a couple of years back, just before the pandemic hit, we started studying the Bhagavad Gita, and then took on the task of doing a Chaturmasa fast. And sustainability has become part of that. So, and to introduce Dave to the group, we first met, I think I'd say 10 plus years back. We lived fairly close by. Children went to the same nursery school, and then onto the same primary school as well. Wives are very good friends, and on the periphery of meeting together, I've had interesting chats over the last several years with Dave on things like things such as AI and consciousness and mind and body. He's a senior practicing doctor, and very, very disciplined, quite like many of our quite unlike me, but quite like many of our friends on the group. And he did his own. The reason I wanted him to be part of this is he's actually gone the full hog of understanding, applying his medical mind to diet, and he and his family have made drastic changes, and they've been vegan for 2 years. So on that basis, Dave, I hope I've done justice to you.
Thanks.
Please, share your thoughts on, what you, what prompted this move, why you are, and your experience so far.
Okay, thanks. Thanks very much. Thank you, Vivek, for the invitation, and hello everybody. It's really nice to meet you. So as Vivek has mentioned, we're good friends for several years, and our kids and wives get together. So just talking about really going vegan. I mean, by vegan, I think I should say that vegan in our interpretation is really shorthand for saying becoming sort of whole food plant-based. So it's a plant-based diet, but I think it's important to recognize, and I'm sure you guys know this already, but that vegan food per se is not actually the way you get the health benefits. It's really from eating whole plants, actually, as such, because some of the newer vegan substitutes and sort of burgers and vegan sausages aren't actually that healthy in raw sort of medical terms, in terms of reducing things like trans fats and sugar and salt levels. And these are really the things which, if you can reduce these, I think the benefits you can get, I think, are quite well proven. In terms of why going sort of vegan, obviously, I think the first thing is looking after number one. So, health, your own health. I think the benefits are quite well proven. I've asked Vivek to circulate the name of a book, which I'd recommend. I think it's very well researched and backed up, and it's about whole food plant-based diet, really. And that's by Michael Greger, sort of How Not to Die. But certainly there have been plenty of proven benefits in reducing, hypertension, which is, one of them really is actually a pandemic affecting, up to 50-60% of adults in later life. So cardiovascular disease is reduced. Almost all the cancers, there's plenty of evidence to show that it reduces the incidence of it. And in fact, it even can affect the course of that and response to treatment. So I think there's lots of benefits there. And of course, the other big sort of looming epidemic is that of dementia and Alzheimer's disease. And again, it's been widely researched and shown that a whole food plant-based diet can help, particularly in that regard, as well as also, of course, diabetes, which is particularly common, more common in the Asian group. As we all get older, the rate of type 2 diabetes is increasing quite fast. So you can show it helps in that. So really, from the health benefits, I think there's some good evidence there, and it's well worth you having a look at. I'd recommend you look at it yourself. The second thing probably I'd say is just in terms of animal welfare, and I suppose that speaks to your sort of ethical concerns and how you feel we should function as a society in feeding ourselves. But clearly there are benefits there if you're maybe avoiding some elements of the way we negative effects of the way we treat animals. And you can, I'm sure you guys are well aware of that. And then the third thing is coming back to really what Vivek is talking about sustainability and the whole ecological piece about using resources well, our limited resources, and reducing CO2 emissions and other aspects of pollution that are, of course, becoming an increasing problem. So the whole piece about animal farming, which I'm sure you may know much more about than I do, but clearly there are benefits to be had there by encouraging more people to adopt a plant-based diet and to reduce the amount of consumption of animal products. So really those are the sort of three sort of main areas, I think, which I think there's definite benefits to be had there. And then moving on probably to how do you implement this? I mean, obviously it is a bit of a change, and society is quite geared up for convenience and fast food, and these things are animal products, and processed foods particularly are easy and available, they're cheap and convenient, so it is a bit of a change going more to sort of whole food, in the sense of trying to eat whole foods almost all of the time. So it is a bit of a change, but I mean, I think it's easily doable, certainly for most of us. I mean, obviously it does involve some adaptation, and it does take time to adapt one's palate to for example, a less salty diet, a less sugary diet, a less sweet diet. But it does, it just takes a few weeks, I think, really. It's also helpful if you have the family on board, because obviously preparing these meals is a little bit more time consuming. So it's helpful to have sort of that support, just logistically, and also sort of as sort of moral support. I think if you do it with a partner, if possible, then I think it's probably easier to sustain it and less tempting to sort of slide back into sort of stopping it. I mean, because I think most people who try it, and I don't know the overall data, but I imagine that most people who try it probably try it and stop it within the first 3 weeks. So normally if you push through the first couple of weeks, then it gets a lot easier, and things are well adapted to it. So I think that's the implementation. And then how do I feel now about it? I mean, I'm very happy, and I feel well. I mean, you can go and get your sort of cholesterol and blood sugars and everything checked before and after if you want. That can sort of maybe help encourage you to maintain a plant-based diet if you want to continue it. So that helps. But I certainly feel very well on it. I don't feel I'm missing out on anything. So those are just my thoughts, really. And maybe this is sort of an interactive forum. So any questions, I'm very happy to discuss it.
Thanks, Dave, for that intro. I will start off a few questions. I'm in front of you as a slide with a whole bunch of discussion topics. Feel free to pick up any one of these or others that you want to further elaborate. I would say, just by way of background, you and I have enjoyed more than one meal with quite a lot of meat in it. Did you, as you were going, so a couple of questions to start off with, what is a trigger point for you to make that change? And secondly, did you or any other family members fall off the wagon, so to say, in spite of these efforts?
I think, as I said, I think the trigger is really looking after number one, so it's health. And I think that's thankfully there wasn't any sort of health crisis that precipitated it, but as a doctor, I mean, I see a lot of patients with obviously health issues, particularly related to which partly can be attributable to diet, certainly. So it's health, really. I think that for me is the main trigger, and I think that's quite a strong trigger for most of us. Falling off the wagon, I mean, most of the family came with me, not everybody, but and I think it is tricky for some youngsters. I mean, if their sort of friends and cohort aren't sort of that way minded, then obviously it's a bit more tricky for them to keep with it. But then again, it may be that their cohort is actually more minded to veganism or vegetarianism, and certainly that makes things a bit easier. So that's a good point.
Okay, and 2 years into this, you're reasonably active, going to the gym regularly, etc. Have you, in terms of worries about muscle mass and that people? The question is how much protein do we really need in the body, and does animal, we've all seen these documentaries, does animal protein actually contribute that much to the protein intake, even for heavy meat eaters?
Good point. I mean, the rule used to be 1 gram per kilo, and you can work it out. Certainly it's easily obtainable on a plant diet. I mean, I think you have to, but as you say, you have to be minded. You can't eat lettuce all day. I mean, it has to have a lot of beans, a lot of pulses and legumes. In fact, the Indian vegetarian diet actually adapts itself brilliantly to getting that, because obviously it will have evolved over time to supply enough protein. So lentils and dals and chickpeas and chanas, all these things are actually, and rajma, kidney beans, are all quite rich in protein anyway. And you can have a look at that. And in fact, it's perfectly possible to obtain plenty of protein on those diets if you have them regularly in your meal every day. Or if you want to go with the Western diet, you have the same things. You have chickpeas and lentils and so on. So yeah, it can all be obtained, and that can all be obtained. That protein level can be obtained without the the possibly inflammatory effects of eating animal protein. So you can do that. So and I mean, there's a good documentary called The Game Changers, which features lots of vegan bodybuilders, who have to have a much larger amount of protein intake. So actually, in terms of building muscle mass, you're fine. And actually, the other important thing to remember is that if you're going to the gym, it's fine building muscles, but you need to, the most important muscle is your heart. And, in terms of ensuring a good blood supply to that, there are definite benefits, that can be had with a plant-based diet.
Cool. At this stage, are there any other questions? Please, raise your hand and come in. I have one last one for, I'm taking privilege as a moderator here. Have you studied, how meat and milk, etc., are produced these days, and whether that has any positive or adverse consequences. Does milk actually naturally, dairy milk actually provide us with calcium, which has been the mainstay of one of the benefits of dairy milk? And have you researched, the hormones and antibiotics, etc., that are given to that filter through?
No, that's a very good point, Vivek, and a lot of people get very, very concerned. I mean, the big concerns with the vegan diet are things like calcium intake, protein, which you've mentioned, and the other one is vitamin B12. So these can all be, in fact, very well obtained on a vegan diet. And to go back to your point about cow's milk or animal milk, yeah, I mean that there are it's worth having a look at it yourself. All of you separately. I'd recommend you can if you go to something like the Nutrition Facts website. It's independent. It's not being it's not pushing any sort of industry, but they're looking at the data, and there are some there may be some issues with cow's milk because of hormones, as you say, and obviously there's antibiotic use in animals as well, and these things which may be present also in the cow's milk. So there may be issues with that, and you can obtain the calcium by other means as long as you again have a well balanced diet with plenty of variety in it with the whole food plant based. So that was the milk thing. Yeah, the B12. Yeah, I mean, it's not that animals produce B12. It's just that if you eat the animal, then you have the B12, which the animal itself has ingested. But you can obtain B12 by other sources as well, just with supplements.
Cool. So look, I'm gonna get others to come in. We have several hands up. Vidya was the first one. Vidya, please go ahead.
Thanks, Vivek. Thanks, Dave, for coming here and presenting. I have a question for you. I know you touched upon Alzheimer's and dementia. How about Parkinson's and epilepsy? Do we need sun on dopamine along with the vegetarian diet? Could you?
Yeah, Parkinson's is interesting because there is some interesting research, and I must admit I should have probably pulled up the reference recently, but there is a link between diet and Parkinson's disease that's worth having a look at. And in fact, again, there may be there's possibly some risk factors associated with the animal-based diet and Parkinson's disease. But this is just, I mean, there's lots of data out there. We have to figure this out. But certainly in terms of the risk of getting Parkinson's, it's not increased as far as I'm aware, certainly on the plant-based diet. So there's plenty of, you can get, it's not that you need dopamine. The more problem is actually that you have an inflammatory response in the brain that's actually affecting those neurons which actually have dopamine within them. So it's actually a sort of inflammatory response more within the brain. So it's not that you have to have enough dopamine. You certainly are getting enough of that. You can produce enough. Was there another question you had in that? Sorry, I think that was it.
Yes, about epilepsy. I don't know if you.
Oh, epilepsy. I'm not aware of any particular data. Either way on that. But really the most important thing is the Alzheimer's disease, and certainly there's a couple of neurologists who've produced quite a lot of work looking at Alzheimer's and plant-based diet, and then they're strongly recommending a plant-based diet.
Cool. Rajesh, I think you were next.
Yeah. So hey, Dave, thanks a lot for taking time. Question for you. Coming from
you sure.
Coming from the Indian subcontinent, all of us we are pretty much drink a lot of milk, and maybe at one point of time when we were growing up, the source of milk was probably okay, but with the way that we are doing animal agriculture these days, probably the source of milk is I probably will use the word pretty loosely, contaminated. And do you think that that actually causes problems, health problems? Or if the source is okay, do you think milk is okay?
Well, yeah, I think that I think sort of yes and yes, really, to the question. So in other words, I think there's an issue with drinking cow's milk. I think that is an issue in itself, which I've discussed already, talking about sort of, the actual fact that it's from an animal. There may be possibly some more inflammatory components within it, so that may be causing an issue. But as you say, also the increasing industrialized production of cow's milk, using obviously things like growth hormones and antibiotics, which some of those may end up in the cow's milk, that can certainly cause more problems. So I think that you're quite right. I think the concerns are twofold: the actual cow's milk itself, and then secondly the means of production.
Thank you.
Okay. Ajay, you had a question?
Yeah. Thanks, Vivek. Thanks, Dave, for speaking to us. So I'm kind of a bit of a novice on this topic, and my understanding was that veganism is nothing but vegetarianism minus animal milk, and I'm assuming it's not just cow's milk; it's all animals. Is that correct?
Yeah. So I mean that's it's pretty close. I mean, it's but taking dairy out. Yeah. I mean, I obviously there are other forms that there's goat's milk and things, but that's not common. But the other big one, of course, is eggs. So eggs are a form of animal protein, and there are issues there, and that gets you off into the whole story about cholesterol as well. So the idea would be to no dairy and no eggs.
Okay.
All right.
Unless there are other ones, I have one more. VP, you have a question. Please come.
Thanks, Vivek. Dave, thank you for educating us today. I just want to push this point about cow's milk a little bit more. You see, we all have been studying Gita and focused on the Hindu scriptures.
Yeah, sure.
So there, the cow is so central, and the cow's milk is supposed to be so healthy. So now you're telling us that it is not. So I'm just trying to figure out how to reconcile those two things.
Sure. So yeah, sorry, the lines. Can you hear me? I think the line's gone
Yes,
a bit.
yes.
A little bit. Yeah. Yeah. I mean, you guys will know far more about, obviously the Gita than I don't. I don't profess any knowledge really, and so I it's difficult for me to say, but yeah. But I think you have to look at it for yourself. See what the data is. Yeah. I'm sorry, I don't know how to comment any further on that. But just to say, just look at the data. Yeah.
There may have been a time when cow's milk was as a substitute.
Okay.
The final question is Sonali, yourself. Please come in.
Yes, thank you. Thank you, Dave, for your insights into veganism. Now, my question is, I mean, some time ago, I was seeing some videos, in some media, saying that animal husbandry is one of the largest contributor for carbon footprint in the planet today. So is veganism one of the ways, encouraging veganism one of the ways to reduce carbon footprint and
exactly
to control the environment? And although, I mean, I feel that milk, as we were discussing, is a very good source of protein and calcium to the body. And I'm not sure how, maybe I'm not aware of it, but how plant-based diet can substitute that. Maybe there are ways, I'm not fully aware of it as yet, but encouraging veganism is a way, and avoiding milk and milk-based products to reduce the carbon footprint.
Yeah, no, I think, well, with your first point, I absolutely agree with. I mean, there's and I think there's plenty of objective data out there, and I think Vivek can give you actually chapter and verse on it in terms of how much it might reduce the CO2 footprint if more people adopted a plant-based diet. So he's the chap with the figures on that. But there is definite. I'm sure that's fairly well established that CO2 emissions and just general usage of other resources like water and so on, and land use, I mean, could be improved with a plant-based diet. Coming back to the milk point, I mean, it is important to remember that I'm not sure of the actual number on it, but a lot of adults, I mean, a lot of adults worldwide are lactose intolerant. They can't have milk anyway. So it was a relatively new genetic variation. I mean, in terms of evolution, being able for adults to actually digest cow's milk. I think it was about 20,000 years ago or something. So it's that sort of, so it's not actually hardwired into the original evolution.
Yeah.
But as I said, I and in terms of what you can get in terms of replacing it, obviously now it's a convenient, readily available source of, which we can all pick up from the supermarket any day. But in terms of what you're missing if you don't have it, I mean, and again, this is just my opinion, okay? But there's calcium, which you can get, there's protein, which you can get, and there's calories, which you can get. So I think you can obtain most things, quite well, if you're not having it.
But the question, the other thing that is coming to my mind, if in a family you're practicing veganism, how about growing up children? For growing up children, milk is very essential for their growth and development, physical and mental growth and development.
Well, actually, no. I mean, there again, you can have a look at the data, but you don't actually need. I mean, interestingly, the Canadian Health Board, I think I was reading, and again, we can check the facts out, but the Canadian Food Board.
We lost you a bit there.
Lost you.
I don't want to mislead you, but I think they've just produced their new guidelines, and they actually put all the industry lobbies off, and they actually have removed dairy as being an essential component of a diet growing up. And I think it's also, again, I should check the facts, but I think it was said that the World Health Organization, I think, has said that actually, a pure plant-based diet is healthy at all times of life. That's including, when kids are growing up as well. So it's doable. I mean, obviously, it's not the convention at the moment. I understand that, but I'm just saying it is doable. And so after weaning off, mother's milk, children can, it is possible to have a plant-based diet.
Thank you for that, Dave. Ajay, did you have a follow-on question?
Yeah, just a quick follow-on. Thanks, Vivek. On the point of carbon footprint, is the carbon footprint a rising footprint a consequence of milk consumption, or is it a consequence of rearing of or industrial rearing of milk animals? I mean, is milk the fundamental reason, or is it meat?
Well, I think Vivek can give a better answer, but I mean, to my mind, it's milk and also meat production. But Vivek, you may want to say.
Yeah, and I'll get into that in a moment. But so I'm conscious of time as well, and I'm not sure how much more time you have, Dave. Would you, unless there are other pressing questions, I do want to cover some aspects of the sustainability aspects and the ecological aspects of a non-vegan diet, and I'm focusing specifically on milk. So are there any last questions for Dave? Dave, do you want to say something in closing on your behalf?
Well, if there aren't any questions, thank you very much for the invitation, and hopefully, Vivek, you'll just circulate. There's just a book I've recommended for people to have a look at, and maybe have a think about it.
That's very kind, and do stick around. I'm not sure how much more time you have.
I'll try. I think I have to get the kids off somewhere, but yeah, but that's very kind. Thank you. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Cheers.
Thank you very much. And thank you on behalf of all my friends.
Very welcome.
Thank you, Dave.
Okay. All right. Cheers.
Thank you.
Right. Bye.
Bye.
Thank you. Bye. Bye. Bye.
So that it's hard to get, you know, a better view from a practicing a medical expert who has actually made drastic changes. And Sonali, to your point, Dave has 3 children, and 2 of them took to veganism quite well. The youngest one has, here's you know, I have about 8-9 slides, but I'm going to go through 3 or 4 of them to explain to you my understanding of the sustainability and ecological impacts of a non-vegan diet, focusing primarily on milk for two reasons. One is, I think the majority of us on this group are vegetarian in any case, and milk is seen as the good thing for us. It's very central to an Indian diet as well. So those are the 2 reasons I'm going to. There's no judgment here at all, and please forgive me if it comes across as that. But broadly, and what you're about to see in slides is something I've been using for the last few years as I've been a guest lecturer at a couple of universities in the UK. Earlier last year, this time last year, I also, at the behest of Rajesh, his daughter in one of the California universities had put together a group of people who were interested in sustainability, and I put together some of these slides for them as well. So, you know, I mean, and food. So a lot of the focus on environment is focused around carbon emissions, and here in front of you is a carbon emission, the carbon cycle. We are just to explain how things work. The reason I'm focusing on food is, and you'll see some more data and follow-on slides, is because.
Can you do a slideshow mode, please, if you don't mind?
Okay, slideshow mode. Yeah, actually, yeah, this will be better. So the reason I'm focusing on food is because it actually has an impact on land, water, and air in a manner which no other human activity does. Now, it's important to understand what there's a role of our industrial activity, human activity emits carbon, but land and ocean absorb it back. I'll explain the orange and the red in a moment. Let me just, sorry, yeah. So the majority of all our human activity is focused on 3 things: living, working, and leisure. And that results in a disturbance of the world ecology. Records have, industrial age started in 1850. Now, there is an international body called the IPCC, the Intergovernmental Institution. No, what does the IPCC stand for? The Intergovernmental Panel on Climate Change. It's about 250 or 300 scientists who've been studying this for the climate change for the last 40 years. It's a voluntary organization, and their reports are actually signed off by heads of governments. Now, what they figured out about 3 or 4 years back is that between 1850 and 2008, there was about a cumulative 206 gigatons of CO2 emitted, net emissions into the atmosphere. But between the 10 years between 2009 and 18, there was nearly 25% of that was accumulated in the atmosphere. And those flows are shown as to what has gone up and what has come down between reabsorption by oceans and landmass. The reason is basically because of how we pursue agriculture, the way we have intruded into natural space, mainly forests, that has reduced the ability for land mass to reabsorb. Oceans have become warmer and more toxic at the same time in the last since the industrial age started in 1850. And that is a further cause why oceans are not absorbing as much carbon dioxide any longer. We talk in gigatons. In an average year for the last 15 years, there's about 5 gigatons of CO2 that in net gets added to the atmospheric budget. Now, 5 gigatons, it seems like a lot, but we don't know. I mean, basically, 5 gigatons is about 10 times the weight of the entire human race right now. So that's the amount of carbon that gets emitted and in net every year. Next slide. So this is, again, as a result of the work of this IPCC body, the scientists, they have in a very neat chart, they have said where does energy get used, and or where does CO2 get accumulated from. Nearly three quarters of CO2 emissions, and this is to your point, Sonali, and I think VP had that question. That is related to energy use, and agriculture is about 18%, 18.4%, of which about 80% of that 18.4% is related to animal husbandry. So poultry, beef, dairy, we've got sheep and pigs and that sort of thing. And I'll explain that 80% a bit more as well. Agriculture is certainly less than energy. And for the last nearly 30 years, I've been working in financing energy projects. The momentum towards clean energy production is very, very strong. It's a matter of time, really, that you'll see the 73% shrink quite rapidly over the next 20 years. The big debate over there is whether it'll shrink fast enough. We don't. That is where there's a lot of political will. The capital sector has to move as well, and it's not clear that we'll be able to move fast enough. Agriculture is a different story in that, you know, food is there is such a huge amount of human preference from individuals like us that unless there is real grassroots action from individual choice, that we'll be able to change our agricultural food practices anytime soon is going to be is far from clear. So this is the journey of a glass of milk. You know, it takes basically cows produce milk. I just wanted to explain what I have understood from assessing how milk is produced and delivered and what it costs in terms of sustainable resources. It starts with 2 cows. We need 2 cows to produce milk on a regular basis because they're pregnant for most of 1 year when they're not producing milk. And once they deliver a calf, that's when they actually deliver milk. So this is a little table to show that over an 8-year period, you start with a young calf. How much food and water do they intake? And I've made some approximations over here. In the dairy industry, people talk about dry food. So a young calf in the first year will consume about 4 tons. In the second year, when it is actually pregnant, little and fully grown, it'll consume about 7.2 tons of dry food. When it is producing milk, that'll go up to about 8.9 tons of dry food. The second cow, of course, comes into action in the second year, and you see a total here of dry food. There's about 2x of that added to make it wet fodder, which accumulates, and you get a total over 8 years as to what that delivers. A cow typically delivers about 10 tons of raw milk, and once it is processed, it reduces in half. There's a lot of, I think, unwanted stuff like pus and all that comes out that has to be taken off. And if you calculate 5 tons divided by 365 divided by 250 ml per glass of milk, that is enough for 55 people getting a glass of milk every day. So what does that mean? So there's a 22x difference between the total water and wet slurry intake by a cow, by 2 cows, which delivers about 30 tons over 8 years in input. Typically, these 2 cows will take about 10 acres of land, and in all, they'll have about 555 tons of water in their life of 8 years. What happens after that? So in those 8 years, they'll emit about 70 tons of CO2 and about 170 tons of manure, which is likely to have quite a lot of antibiotics and growth hormones in there because of assuming this is an average industrial cow. They'll also produce 6 calves in that period of time. These 6 calves, 3 of them, assuming they're female, half of them are female, will probably go into milk production. The other 3, along with these 2 other cows that at the end of their lives will produce about 750 kilos of meat and go into the leather industry. The skin will go into the leather industry. And there are other uses, there's an efficient use of everything. So in net, what that means is per glass of 250 milk, the dairy equivalent emits about 4.7 kilos of, requires about 4.7 kilos of water, 0.33 square meters of land, and nearly 0.6 kgs of CO2 is emitted in that process. Now, this is an underestimation because I haven't taken into account the impact of the bull that's required to come into action every year to produce that carb. And I haven't taken into account any of the transportation or the processing energy and emissions and water that's used for that. In fact, some of the analysis I've seen shows that actually water, there's about 65 kgs of water that is required in order to produce a glass of milk. And the land use is much higher than what I'm predicting over here. In any case, oat milk has a 13 times improvement. So i.e., in the same amount of water on the land, you can get 11 to 13 times of oat milk, given that. If carbon is a factor, you can get 5 times the amount of oat milk compared to dairy milk. And essentially what we have is an ancient way of converting land, water, and sunshine into a resource that we can actually get delivered through other sources more efficiently right now. That's the essence of this one slide, which I hope has made a little bit of sense. The last thing I'll talk about is, before we go into Q&A, is who we are, what we are. There's about 150 million square kilometers of livable land. And again, the same organization of scientists, a global body of scientists called the IPCC have come up with this analysis. What happens is all human activity, which is infrastructure, if you can see this, infrastructure, cities, all our roads, buildings, everything put together, they can fit into something like 3 times the size of California, 1% of usable land. All our crop, which is about 12% of land, can fit into the aggregate of usable land in the US and Canada. So actually that gives us, the human race, quite a lot of potential for impact. And half these crops are actually used for animal feed. So there's quite a lot of room over there. However, this big area of pasture, which is about 43% of usable land, that is equivalent of all of Asia, Western Europe, and Latin America put together. And that means that leaves just Africa and Australia as for further growth if you have to continue producing animal-based milk and meat on this basis. These are on the side are the results of a survey I had run. Basically, the question I had on a survey was, in your opinion, why do human beings not farm and eat lions and meat at large scale? the real answer is that we would do that, save that lions and meat eat other animals. So if we wanted to feed off omnivore animals, that we would have run out of space on planet Earth long time back. So it is this intrusion of our way of producing food that has a big impact. I'll stop here for, how are we doing for the best part of 50 minutes into our call? Are there any questions? I do have a few other slides I can get into if there's interest. But I'll stop
There
here.
is one question from Gita. She's raised.
Hi, Gita, please.
Yeah, hey, thanks, Vivek, for doing this. So, I'm actually trying to get into this kind of a wiser choice-based decision making when we eat. Is there any movement, do you think, where people will start putting like calorie information, like an environmental footprint information on foods? Is it possible?
It's a great deep desire of mine to start something like that, because the information is very hard to come by, reliable information, and people like me are putting together stats depending on what our basic understanding. There are no standards. It'll take some while, but really, I think that is exactly where we need to be. Is that in that awareness?
Right.
I recently, bought in my Christmas shopping, bought some clothes from a sustainable clothing company, and they do give how much land has been saved, how much water has been saved as a result of a shirt, a sustainable shirt that they created from bamboo fiber rather than cotton. Cotton, as you know, wool in particular comes from a lot of our clothing, which we take for granted. Simple things like wool actually comes from animals themselves. And I think that is the frontier, and really it should fall within the capability of all us engineers in this group to come up with a way of having an equivalence. What is a glass of milk? How many trees? What are the better alternatives that you can create as a result of that? But it's very hard. I have fallen off. I've known this for about 4 or 5 years in totality, but still it's very hard to wean off of ghee. And milk actually doesn't agree with me, but when I see some ice cream, there's only so much of it I can resist. The point is we have to go there. How and what, and I'm very keen to pursue this. Welcome anybody who wants to join that effort.
Yeah, great, thanks. Maybe I'll get in touch with you and see what might be a way to do that.
Please. Sonali.
Thanks, Vivek. So just, sorry, it's my lack of knowledge. But veganism, does it mean like avoiding any milk-based products also, like paneer, ice cream, mithai?
Totally, because you still need a cow for it.
Okay. So milk powder, everything, right?
Everything. Anything
all that is a big industry themselves. So all those would go then.
It needs to, yeah. Because you see, and this is where a glass of milk, I've shown you, a glass of milk out of 250 ml, there's only about 25 grams of fat and protein and other things in that. So you have to condense that glass of milk into, you barely get a spoonful of butter out of that. And the same thing, with paneer and things like that. Rajesh, sorry.
So the other part that is coming to my mind, so basically all that is happening with consumption of milk is larger input of CO2 in the atmosphere, right? So it's we know plants can scavenge off that CO2 from the atmosphere. So if you increase plants or trees, planting of more plants and trees, that would to some extent negate that effect.
So here's the thing, Sonali. that actually, if you see this chart, we are currently at about 8 billion people on planet Earth. Right now, all 8 billion can live very comfortably in what is the US and Canada put together. And we'll have quite a lot of free space to grow if we were just all to be vegans. It is this huge area, which could be forests, that could be absorbing all the CO2 that we have cleared to make way for pastures. And oftentimes, in intensive dairy production and meat production, they don't get pastures. These animals are, or their stories of horror stories of how they're fed their own cow dung. They're fed a mix of crushed chickens and they're actually put on a non-veg diet to get them to grow fast enough, along with lots of hormones and things like that. So, that's what you heard. I mean, that's what you heard earlier. That was the point of bringing Dave along, was to show you that, medical professionals are seeing this. But if that sorts your question out, Rajesh, you've had your hand up for a while.
Yeah, there are three Rajeshes here who raised the hand.
Rajesh Sanghamit. Yeah.
I'm going to take the liberty of asking the question to you. So, Vivek, a lot of people have, I started off this journey of understanding, okay, hey, causing damage to the environment means, using less and less things. So I started taking shorter showers or driving, the optimal distance and trying to take better modes of transport. How do you compare the carbon emissions, what these kind of activities use, heating or transportation, compared to that, to the food, the type of food that we eat, vegetarian food or the milk-based food or the non-veg meat-based food? Do you have statistics that you can help us understand that?
Yeah, so if you look at this, all of transport on the slide, all of transport is about 16%. Yeah. We have over here, there is, where is the water industry here? All water use is I think allocated between, wastewater is 1.3%, but each of the industries absorb their water content as well. So, the role of things like us moving around, using cars, every increment counts right now. I'll show you another graph in a moment to demonstrate the urgency of this. So everything must work together. But the point is, we take so much of our land to produce food, and mainly for animal husbandry, that has a real impact on biodiversity. And secondly, it is polluting the oceans. And thirdly, the ability for land to reabsorb carbon dioxide, carbon emissions from the atmosphere is critically harmed. That's the point over here. That actually, so if there's one, you heard that using one stone to kill 3 birds, no pun intended. There is agriculture, our food habits are probably one of the biggest things that we can do, and that is actually in the hands of each individual.
I agree with you, and I think that's the sense that I've also gotten from my reading. Rather than look at reducing electricity inside the house, which is also impactful. I think the bigger impact is what we eat, changing what we eat. Thank you.
Yeah, and to that point, you see, all of us now have LED. We won't think of getting a fluorescent light bulb because it was very easy. There was government regulation, there was technology. We suddenly had, by mandate, they withdrew all the fluorescent light bulbs. We didn't notice the difference. In 3 or 4 years' time, it'll be very hard to justify not buying an electric car. Yeah, those are very lazy decisions that we don't have to think too hard to make those decisions as individuals. But food is somewhere that there will be rebellion if tomorrow the governments do decide to legislate against dairy. Yeah. Cool. let's go. Sorry, I didn't mean to take up this entire chat.
No, there are multiple questions. Maybe I'll moderate it
Gunj.
for you now in terms of questions. So Gunj,
Yeah.
why don't you go with your question?
Hey, Vivek, thanks a lot. Very insightful, helpful. My wife Meenu actually has a question, so go ahead.
Hi, Vivek, about
Hi.
dairy consumption. What do you say about like moderately consuming and reducing food waste when it comes to sustainability? Because changing totally becoming vegan doesn't seem like a fair enough choice. It's not going to be an easy choice because I've tried it. A vegetarian, I try to live sustainably as much as I can. But there are somewhere where I try moderation, but I think food waste is another big thing that could be causing, so what do you say about that?
I'll also
Food.
add, she tries and I try to help. Hey, go ahead.
Yeah, no, actually, so there's a book called "There's No Planet B." There's a very good chart in there, which I can post separately. I'll pull it out and I'll post it on the group about how calorie intake works. And the reality is this: that actually food waste, transport, processing, and things like that, it is an issue. That has very little impact. Um, here's how it works. For every vegan element, I'm leaving aside all these plant-based sausages and burgers and all, every whole food calorie takes about 2 calories input from in the field between sunshine and land and water. Every 1 calorie of animal base, so whether it's milk, cheese, on average takes 12 calories of input. So that scale difference between the two is huge. In terms of, it's very hard to make a switch. In spite of knowing all this, I struggle with it myself. My wife and children are strictly vegetarian. They struggle without milk and cheese. Those are very fundamental parts. So yes, this awareness, even a small decline, phasing out. And one of the theories that I have is around the frictional awareness, and let me explain that in a moment, in a few moments. You see, in olden times, it would have been very hard to procure milk on a regular daily basis. It would be very hard to procure meat on a regular basis. Why? Because somebody had to go and hunt an animal or slaughter. And if you want milk on a regular basis, you have to maintain a cow. It's very hard to do that. Today, we have vegetables, meat, milk, all laid out in a supermarket. So the effort to procure that is all the same. And we don't have, so that friction's been taken away. And perhaps that's a bad thing in some respects. So if you can moderate and try to push it out of the dairy and make, however, the other thing is that, some of the experts will tell you that unless you switch off completely, if you do a full switch off, it doesn't leave, the craving doesn't leave ever. So that's the pluses and minuses, but any effort is good. I hope that answers. Shall we go on to others?
Yeah, I have 3 more questions here. 3 more people raised hands here.
Yeah.
VP Rajesh, I saw you raise your hand, but looks like you lowered it again.
So, no, I want to go.
Okay, go. You go first, then we will let
Thank you. So Vivek, I'll just give you a preamble from where I'm coming. There was a famous Netflix documentary called Game Changers, and I watched it, and then for a year I tried to be as close to vegan as one could be, and it was very difficult. But I was somehow able to do it. But I didn't really feel any major difference even after doing it for almost a year. And then ever since we started focusing on Advaita and Gita and all that, somehow milk became, especially during Chaturmasa, actually, because milk became a big part of my diet. And I enjoy it and, have been consuming quite a bit of it. So to move away from that completely seems like, I get the part about the ethical side of it, that, animals are not treated properly, etc., etc. So that part I totally get it and I agree with it. But to the extent, the animals are looked after well, and you take the milk that you need, only that much, then I still don't see the need to change the habits. I guess that's what I'm trying to point out. So what do you have to say to that?
So I'll talk about the need. I mean, I'm totally with you, VP. I've got the most fragile willpower amongst this entire group. In spite of knowing all this, in spite of the fact that milk actually doesn't suit me at all, I kind of fall off the wagon regularly for ice creams and things like that. And it is very hard to find substitutes, but they are there, number one. To talk about the need, it's unquestionable. I mean, the more, I have a reading list at the end of this presentation, the more we look into it, it's just not sustainable to carry on producing, good quality milk. So there are a few things to talk about, and this is where the awareness comes in. One is it actually good for us? And the answer I think you'll find is no. I've seen cows in which have been treated so well. They're fed a regular diet of neem and organic food and things like that. But even then, it's not. Leaving aside the spiritual, the ethical side of it, it is just not. Milk is just not good for us. Number one. Number two, if a few people have to have milk, maybe the world can sustain that. But if the entire population deserves to have milk, then we cannot. So that is another thing to consider over there. There is, frankly, the level of deforestation that we have. It cannot, there will be some action that will need to be taken around agriculture, because that is a big issue we are dealing with in relation to climate change.
Got it. And just one more thing, Vivek. So when you talk about veganism, my understanding is you give up even leather as well, right? So all your belts, sandals, leather shoes,
Sure.
Everything goes out of the window, right?
Everything goes out of the window, except what I'd say is that if you already have leather belts and leather seat car upholstery, leather jackets, etc., then might as well use it. There's no point in throwing that, and because in terms of the most sustainable garment you have is the one that's already hanging in your wardrobe. So buying even cotton-based products has a ecological impact. I know people who are multi-millionaires. They earn tens of millions every year, but they will only buy clothes from secondhand shops. So there are people who are making very drastic changes in this regard. So
I was going to say that there was a reason why our ancestor used to roam around naked, but
So we have 4 more hands raised here. I'm going to go and ask Vidya to ask a question.
Hey Vivek, thanks for presenting. My son here sitting and watching your presentation has a question, so I'll give it to him. This is Vineet.
Please.
Hi. So I was just wondering if you believe that the farming and that the food that people are making is enough for everyone to sustain everybody on Earth, because if everyone or most people were to become vegan, then a lot of the food that many people eat will go away. So they'll have to transfer to different types of food. So can the humans make enough of that food?
Yeah, the simple answer is absolutely yes. So I'm trying to get to that slide that I showed you. Hang on. Where is that gone? Yeah, the simple answer is, let me just see. Yeah, over here. So you see this green patch over here, cropland, 12%. This is no more than all of US and Canada put together, which is by no means anywhere near complete. It's about 12% of usable land on this planet. It discounts all the mountains and deserts which cannot be used. So there's enough, and half of this 12% uses crop for animals. So if you're not using any animals for our food chain, then you've got plenty. You can double the food production, and we'll still have lots and lots of space on planet Earth. The distribution of calories by region is a different issue. So, in poorer countries, people don't get a lot of food gets wasted between the field and the plate, even before it gets to the plate, because of lack of cold chain. Hopefully that answers your question.
Okay, thank you.
So I've got many more people here who raised their hands. Muku, I'm just going in the order in which I can see here.
Yep. Thanks, Vivek, for doing this. One question, you talked about animal husbandry being the biggest consumer. Is there a break between milk and meat, right? Because you're doing both for that, right? Is there a breakup there? Is one of them consume more of that pie of data?
Yeah, so there are, look, I mean, so just taking, we get our milk from basically sheep and cows. We get our meat from chicken, pigs, sheep, and cows. So it's anybody. Now, a dairy cow, a typical dairy cow will give will have 3 calves. So that's 6 years plus 2 years of growing. It'll have about 7 to 8 years life before it gets slaughtered. A beef cow will get slaughtered at 18 to 24 months. So I don't have a ratio, but I'd say half and half is very easy to assume, because there'll be a lot more people who will have milk and milk products than would consume meat products.
Okay, thank you. And
Muku, from what I have read also, it's roughly 50-50. The milk and the meat-based industry, they consume roughly 50-50 of the entire resources. And unfortunately, whether we like it or not, the game of odds, half female, half male, end up happening in animals as well.
Okay, got it. Thank you.
You had a follow-on question, or we can go to Ranjani?
I'm good, Rajesh. Thank you.
Okay, Ranjani.
Thanks, Vivek, for the presentation. There's so much interest in milk because I think it's the hardest part to give up, more even than meat. I want to do my part, but I just had a question on all the different kinds of milk that are available as a substitute, the oat milk, the soy milk, the almond milk, So what is your thought on that? Is there one better than the other in terms of substitution?
Yeah, so I think soy has I have gone off dairy milk in daily consumption about 15 years back, and soy milk was the first thing that was available, but that has health issues. Too much soy, particularly for men, that has estrogen issues. I know my wife suffered from estrogen problems as well. So soy is seen, from a footprint point of view, there are more and more. Oat milk is supposed to be has the lowest ecological footprint. I use oat milk quite regularly for breakfast and coffee and things like that. Almond milk, we get good almond milk over here. That's the other one. But once you move away, the factor is so large that you might have a 1x to 2x ecological impact in net between different types of milk, different types of plant-based milk. but you'll have like a 10x impact compared any of those compared to dairy milk.
So just to there was another thing that Shiva was mentioning on the chat, Vivek, just to add on to it. His question was, is almond milk more water intensive than the regular dairy milk?
I read something about that, to be honest. I mean, in my, because the numbers that are available are all over the place in this regard. So, but I mean, to get a true fix on dairy, you've got to look at the whole cooling chain. So yes, I mean, water comes in through what a cow will consume in its feed and its drinking water for over a 7-8 year period. Whereas an almond, you got to take the water used in growing an almond tree. And I don't know, frankly, how long it takes for a tree to start producing almonds and how much water to consume. And then, so there's going to be water content, carbon content for a handful of almonds. What I understand is that almond milk has only 1 or 2% of solid intake, so it's got to be pretty light. But I did read that almond milk seems to be taking more water than dairy milk, which is a little surprising. It doesn't come into it, and I haven't looked at the detailed numbers there.
Okay, maybe we'll take this as an action and probably look it up. I have four more hands raised here. Let's move forward with the next question. Shanta, do you want to go?
Yeah, sure. So one question I have, Vivek. So vitamin B12 is very critical, and especially when we go to a doctor at this age or like even before, women usually are diagnosed with anemia, especially the Indian women after the delivery and everything. So we have to take iron supplements and everything. And vitamin B12 is one of the important, like the soluble vitamin, which is important for our health. I don't know whether there is another substitute for that other than the milk vitamin B12. Maybe we can take supplements on that. But when we avoid milk, you mean to say we have to avoid ghee, buttermilk, everything, right?
Everything. It's about getting rid of that cow.
Yeah. So what I know a little of is like the buttermilk and ghee are prescribed as strongly suggested in Ayurveda itself. And are we saying we should reduce the consumption of milk rather than completely avoiding milk products? Because then you have the other effects like a buttermilk. It helps with the gut bacteria. Then that whole cycle will get impacted, like it might got indigestion and other things. How do we balance that? Are we going to take supplements when we completely abstain from milk and milk products?
Look, I mean, so that was the point of having my friend Dave start this conversation, and that from a health point of view, you had a doctor saying earlier today that his own personal experiences and advices that a whole plant-based diet is definitely the best option. You have a lot of media out there that says this. I'm no expert in this, on the health side of this. I think, yes, there are, women have, particularly as a result of childbirth, have quite a lot of sort of issues to balance. There are lots of trade-offs, but really, where we are today, we are nearly 8 billion people on planet Earth. Half of them are women. Will be 10 billion in the next 20 years. So that'll mean another billion women and billion each of men and women coming into the planet. We're running out of space. So in any case, if you leave, assuming climate change wasn't an issue, we'd have to face this problem in going out in the future. There are, all the evidence suggests that there are perfectly good ways of adopting diets out there. It is not easy, but there are ways.
I'll find out more.
Yeah, no, you see, the point is, and hopefully, Rajesh will conclude, that we as a group should, given that we've gone through Chaturmasa, we study the Bhagavad Gita, it's time to update, and we have all the capability amongst ourselves. I don't know whether we have any biochemists amongst ourselves, but we should really study this and debate it and put stuff into practice. So hopefully that'll be a to-do at the end of this.
Can I interrupt a little bit? This is Lakshmi.
Lakshmi, there were multiple questions. So let me just take that in the order that they have come in, if you don't mind.
Okay.
If you can please.
Yeah, I was going to answer a little bit on Shanta's point.
Oh, okay. Go ahead. Go ahead.
So, Shanta, that's a very valid question. And to me, I have that issue too with the gut and also the joints and all, being a woman. So since I think 5-6 years, I've totally shifted to almond milk and also taking D3 and magnesium. So because of the milk, I get calcium deposits in the joints. So that helped a lot on my side. And my doctor is also very, she's fine with it. She's okay. And so I can't take oat milk because I have to go for gluten-free. So there are options, but it takes a while, a little bit to get adjusted. But yeah, you can try out and talk to your doctor.
It's not about the milk. I understand. I was talking about buttermilk, which is more related to the gut bacteria.
Yeah, probably probiotics, but again, you have to get onto those.
Let's take
There
it
probably
offline.
other sources of probiotics.
Can I interrupt?
Thank you.
Can I interrupt on the similar
So,
lines, like
Ajay,
sorry.
the next question is from you, Ajay.
Thanks. So Vivek, fascinating topic. But I'm kind of, as I listen to this, I'm thinking that are we trying to follow like a one-size-fits-all kind of an approach? So medically, as Dave was talking about, I'm sure there are studies which talk about the benefits of milk and then the issues that milk presents. But as Ayurveda kind of tells us, there are different body types, and there are some people who should be taking milk, others should not be taking milk. So I think in my sort of mind, the whole sort of medical science around milk is not sort of universal. And if you look at medical studies, there'll be one study which says it's good, another will say it's not so good. So it's also about a lot of data and samples and all that good stuff. So I'm not going to get into that. But the fundamental question that I'm sort of just kind of turning in my head is that we've got a man-made problem, right? We're just too many. You said we're going to go to 10 billion. We're consuming a lot of natural resources. We're being reckless in the whole thing. We're kind of creating a huge environmental footprint. So it's a man-made problem. But in order to solve what's really a man-made problem, are we willy-nilly not disturbing the ecological or the natural sort of cycle and creating a different kind of imbalance in the process? And just to give an example, I mean, from what I've been hearing thus far, it appears to me that we're trying to kind of take the cow out of existence because of all the environmental footprint it leaves behind and kind of creates trouble for mankind, right? So, I'm very sort of early in this kind of debate, so I might be talking a lot of nonsense, but I kind of get a feeling that to solve a problem, in our selfish desire to solve that problem, we're trying to play around with the environment. And for somebody for this group, a lot of us are kind of doing the Gita, and we talked about that. I mean, cow has been central since Vedic times, right? And so those are the kind of thoughts which are swirling my head, and so just love to kind of hear your comment, because in my head I feel like, Vivek, moderation is probably the answer as opposed to prohibition.
So prohibition is never a good answer because that leaves a vacuum. It is more about understanding, creating that awareness and making choices that are sustainable. So these are some of the slides. Let me quickly take you through this slide that should shed. There's a group, there's an association in the US called Proceedings of the National Academy of Sciences. So they put out a paper which looked at the entire biomass of planet Earth. And animals, this red A, and the animal kingdom is 2 gigatons out of effectively something like 500 plus gigatons of just carbon mass. They looked at they compared organisms or life on Earth in terms of carbon content. Human livestock is a multiple of humans. So humans are 0.06 gigatons. Livestock is more than that. Wild mammals is 0.001. So what we have done is, and there's quite a lot of study being done on biodiversity. Why is biodiversity very relevant? Since 1990, there's a study that over the last 30 years, or maybe 40 years, I'm not sure, natural capital has depleted by 40%. That is nature has depleted by 40%, whereas you would know better than me as to what has happened to GDP. We know global GDP has gone up in the last 30 years by about 2.5, 3x. So what the current way of living, of spending leisure, of working, is exhausting our natural resources. Here is a chart that talks about various things, various metrics of sustainability. Biodiversity. There's, out of all the animals on planet Earth, 94% are farm animals. Yeah. What that has done is that is rapidly taking out animals from the food chain, which means when you take out a certain type of animal from a food chain through deforestation or polluting the oceans or making the skies unlivable for these things, it affects both the animal food chain above and below that class. Freshwater pollution, 78% is through crop and animal activity. Freshwater use, 31% livestock and fish, 33% crop for humans. Deforestation, 54% related to livestock and fish. Land use, 37% for livestock and fish. Yeah. Greenhouse gases, about 11% globally. So if you look at it, basically, we're running out of space and ecological net worth, if you will, to continue using animals. So from a health point of view, I totally agree that there's a different makeup. At the time of the Vedas, when Ayurveda, the science that we know, let's call it 4,000, 5,000 years back, there would have been no more than 100 million people on planet Earth. There was plentiful of everything. But right now, this is, we're very much at the end game of, you can see all the red bars as to what is happening with the animal kingdom. What our insistence on using animal products, what it's doing.
Vivek,
so hopefully,
I will, if you don't mind, I will have to move to the next question.
Please.
From Manu. Manu.
Hi, thanks, Rajesh. And thanks, Vivek. This is a great topic to discuss and debate. And, for me, it's more a newer topic for me to discuss and debate. But I just wanted to make a couple comments and ask a question. I thought that Vidya's son, Vineet, made a great point about, can we feed everyone? I'm just paraphrasing what he said. Can we feed everyone if we give up totally, certain categories of foods that are consumed today? I have a garden. I grow vegetables in the summer, and I practice organic, gardening. And we had a discussion one time with my husband's uncle, and I was trying to promote, why doesn't everybody do this? And he made a great point that, not everybody can be fed if we only use organic methods. So he was telling us about, way back when in India, when they started using chemical pesticides and chemical fertilizers, they were able to, grow more food and feed more people, so that, the hunger issue was became a thing of the past for a lot of people. So I feel like it's a little hard to create a balanced view across the board on, what one must do. I think the main motivation to adopt something like this becomes more of an ethical or moral issue within us. We want to do this because ethically or morally we feel that the other option is non-negotiable. Because I think that, availability of items, cost of the different foods become factors in one's decision to consume or not consume those foods, and also individual, physiological reactions. So, it's some foods cause inflammation. I'm lactose intolerant, so I don't drink milk, but I do, of course, eat yogurt and cheeses and stuff like that. So my question, after all of saying all of this, is really, does it make more sense to reduce our overall consumption versus giving up certain types of foods? Because there is still that aspect of hunger that is there in many poorer countries, and maybe the same amount of food that is produced in the world can be used to feed more people, rather than there being that inequity of distribution of food. I'll stop there.
All great points, and moderation is always better than eat and consuming in excess. But moderation still locks in the problem. And today, all the analysis suggests that actually there is enough food that's produced. From a calorie-wise point of view, there's about what gets to the plate globally on average is 2,500 calories per person, but it's not evenly distributed. I work in Africa in infrastructure. The problem with food in Africa, there's enough that's grown, but about a third of that gets wasted because of an inadequate infrastructure to transport it. The cold chain and the transportation and the warehousing is not adequate. So they have to import food, which makes it more expensive. Protein, their delivery of protein has an expense issue associated with it. But Manu, I'd say this again, that I think it's a matter of just making these choices and analysis on our own to get past these very ingrained sort of understanding of what is good for us. So today is very clear we have better alternatives in terms of food, which are healthier, safer, and ecologically better. There is an issue of taste habits. There's social norms. There are certain dishes, it's very hard for a pure vegan to go to somebody else's house and not impose on, it becomes a real nightmare. And we have other friends amongst I won't name names, who have made drastic changes, but they would have struggled. They used to make fun of vegans, now become themselves because of health reasons, and have a world difference in the way they are. So I think what the point I'm making is, for me personally, it is very clear. I struggle with making these changes. If I go to a restaurant with people, I struggle to make keep to a vegan choice. But that is where we are headed, and one way or the other, we're going to be forced towards that. Or what will happen is the quality, the adverse health impacts of our continued choices, or the quality of food will keep deteriorating over time as well.
Vivek, we got 3 more hands raised. Mahesh,
and time is running.
Yeah, time is running out. Mahesh, please, I request all of you to please keep your questions short. Mahesh, go.
Vivek, hi. let me quickly go to the question. You see, normally when I was small, I mean, I've been living with cows, and I've seen cows living. Actually, milk itself is a product which is produced excess by the cow. So I believe this itself is sustainable. I mean, that is one. Number two is, the buttermilk and ghee aspect of it are both medically proven as well. Third thing is, after the spicy food, if you don't eat yogurt, the meal is not fulfilling. Considering all this, if we don't take this, there may be side effects of our health, and to ensure that we are in a good health, we have to take tablets, and that is not more sustainable, is what my view is. I mean, what do you think about it?
So let's start with three. The one is, the point number three, let's not eat spicy food. And Chaturmas has been a great example of that, right? I mean, we've seen that, how wonderful the body feels not having spicy food. I forget the second point, but the first point you made, milk is not at all superfluous. It is, to keep a cow in castration, to continually force it to have babies, to have calves. That is the main purpose. For production of meat and leather, a cow is fully grown in 18 months. So, a cow can be slaughtered at the end of 18 months for all the meat that it'll ever produce. There's no point in feeding it any longer than that. But to actually keep a cow, on average, it can produce about 3 calves in its life. To force it to produce calves, and those calves are then given formula milk and taken away for either, again, their own journey of either slaughter or producing milk. By no means is your number one right. What was the second point again in between the three?
I said, if you don't take milk, buttermilk and ghee, it could lead to health issues where we have to pop in more tablets, which is making tablets is not sustainable.
No. I mean, there is, again, the whole point of people like doctors like Dave, my friend Dave, who made these changes. If you look at bodybuilders and athletes and game changers who are making those changes, there is no sacrifice to health as a result of moving away from that. And you and I, we have a problem of a sweet tooth as well. So that's a far bigger drain. Sugar is a far bigger danger for you and me than it is than lack of butter or ghee. But in the interest of time, we are happy to carry on that conversation.
Two more questions. Sonali.
Rajan or Sonali?
Sonali.
I would like to make a few takeaway points here. First of all, I agree with the discussions that, a number of people made about buttermilk and yogurt. Those are musts in our diet for good, healthy gut bacteria. And, that's how we supplement instead of, promoting not take yogurt and promoting taking probiotics, which will not fully cover all the gut bacteria that is needed for our stomach. So that is one aspect of it. Secondly, you mentioned about, there's not enough resources. The population will increase from 8 billion to 10 or 15 billion. So instead of reducing, milk consumption or milk product consumptions, why not we look into other avenues like population control? Nobody talks about population control. Why do you want the population to increase from 8 to 10 or 15 billion? Why can't we talk about means to control the population? This is, because animal husbandry, as I understand, this is a part of a food chain that has been practiced for several thousand years. And it has been going on, and it is kind of engraved in many of our DNAs who are not vegetarians. Like I'm a strictly non-vegetarian. I eat meat and all kinds of milk products, everything. And this is like being a Bengali, this part and part of our culture. Okay, and I cannot even think about living without meat or meat products, milk products. So instead of thinking, and thinking of, I mean, of course, we have to practice moderation to have a healthy life, not to go excess or go beyond limits. Of course, moderation is key here. Have moderation, but instead of totally removing milk or going to vegetarianism, because this is all part of a food cycle or food chain that goes on. I mean, certain animal eats certain other animals, or they eat plants and we eat animals, chicken or beef or whatever it is. This is all part of a food cycle that has been, a food chain that has been going on for several thousand years. And drastic and changing it suddenly because we are depleting out of natural resources, I think maybe too fast-fetched, in the sense that instead of cutting out here, I mean, definitely we need to cut out here by practicing moderation, but we need to look at other aspects also, like, reducing consumerism,
I take
reducing population, etc.
I take your point.
So
And
Vivek,
another
we
question,
had to balance.
Vivek.
We had to balance the time. So
Vivek,
Sonali,
one more
please make the question.
Vivek.
Vivek, we don't have time. Please answer to the point, and let's move to two more people, and then we will be done.
Yeah, just one more thing, Vivek, I wanted to mention is this is something very, environmental challenges are something very close to me, and I'm not a biochemist as such, but I understand biochemistry. I'm a medicinal chemist, so I'm happy to take on the discussion separately with you to any initiatives that you would like to work in this area.
Thank you. I think I won't go into what you're talking about, because that's a whole different tangent on population control. But I mean, I think so. We'll talk about that separately. Rajan and Lakshmi, let's please do come in one at a time.
Rajan.
Yeah, I think I'll come first. Thanks, Vivek, for putting up this together for all of us. It was really enlightening. But the only thing is, I joined a bit late, so I'm not too sure whether the question that I'm going to ask has been covered already or not. So this is regarding actually, is there an right age when one should shift? Because this no milk thing, is it applicable for children also? I mean, and it is hard for us to fathom that children can go without milk in their growing years, at least, in our subcontinent. And let me extend it a bit further. And how is it for the infants? I mean, infants till the age of 3 are mostly on milk only. And
so very simply, I mean, what infants get are formula milk, which is very heavily processed milk. They can't, if you were to give an infant a full-on dairy milk taken from the supermarket, they will not be able to absorb it. Number one. Number two, the Dr. Dave Mudgil, who spoke to us at the start, he actually addressed this very directly. His own children have gone vegan, and he said, from milk is being rapidly removed. I think starting with Canada, they have removed milk as an essential part of the diet. And his own, I'm paraphrasing his words, in that after a child is weaned off mother's milk, it is entirely possible for the child to have a healthy diet with other alternatives to dairy milk.
Yeah, so sorry for interruption. Actually, this is actually regarding infants only. Let me pinpoint what I wanted to say. Let's say there are mothers who can't breastfeed, right? And if they have got such kind of a problem, those kids have to be fed they are fed on powdered milk, right? So that's a substitute for them. So
yeah,
how is that problem taken care of?
That's exactly it. That processed milk bears very little resemblance to dairy milk. And
so what do we feed them with? Where do we feed them?
You get alternatives. We have, in our supermarkets here in the UK at least, there are lots of non-dairy alternatives for baby milk.
So Rajan, I think Vivek's point is not about, if someone has a need, they have to take. He's not saying everybody eliminate it. His point is that, if we are conscious about what we are doing, then I think we'll probably reduce our consumption. That's the key point what he's saying. With that, I'm going to ask Lakshmi to ask the last question.
Okay.
My question is simple. I just wanted to understand how your daily meal plan is, just to get an understanding.
My
Whether we
daily
can,
meal.
yeah, whether we can adopt or not to some extent.
It's very suboptimal, and I have to put my hand up and say that I fail at this. But my ideal day is I start off with a bowl of porridge made in almond milk or oat milk, along with a cup of coffee, again with a little bit of oat milk. You get a barista coffee version for that. My lunch is usually, and sort of my porridge is quite filling. It's more like a rubbery. I don't put any sugar in it, but it'll have a number of fruits in it, blueberries and banana and things like that. So it's quite a wholesome and filling meal. And then some combination of soup, khichdi, or chanas. I don't take to rotis. Wheat doesn't agree with me as well. So I try to avoid that. But rice, brown rice, white rice, different kinds of Japanese rice. I make a lot of Japanese miso based foods. There are soups and brothy soups that can make. Italian and Greek food has quite a lot of repertoire in that. So, there are alternatives, and I think part of the reason Rajesh, I think, asked me to do this, and we are getting into that right now, given how successful we've been at studying the Bhagavad Gita, given how successful we have been at Chaturmasa, given how the capabilities we have, we are all from well-educated engineer types who can analyze, assess, create awareness. We should try and attack this as I'm frankly looking for a coalition of the willing to give veganism a go, and it'll be a journey. It'll be a year-long journey that I'm thinking of doing, and let's see where we get to with that. The whole idea is to find wholesome, tasty, socially there is an element of celebration with food. There's an element of food is central to demonstrating our prosperity as well, in addition to the nourishment that food provides. The idea is to find alternatives that are also friendly to the environment as a result of this. So that's my final word to that, and hopefully, thank you for all the interest. This could go on for a few more hours, and we'd still be scratching the surface only.
Yep, I agree with you. Vivek, thank you very much.
Thanks, Vivek.
Extremely interesting. So, I just want to conclude by, I'm not going to summarize what we discussed because it's pretty interesting, but just want to put the context as to why we did this in a Gita group, study group, right? So according to, the Taittiriya Upanishad, I did some research before this particular discussion, and I'm going to share these links with you guys. I'm not going to talk a lot about all these things. So one of the best things that I came across is in terms of how to interpret what is called as a Pancha Maha Yajna, which we have to do as quote unquote householders or people who are in the earning stage in our life. The 5 different types of yajna that we have to do. Yajna is a sacrifice at our end, as to 5 what we have to do. And I came across this beautiful thing which is by Swami Dayananda's organization somewhere. So it talks about 5 different yajna. One is called Deva Yajna, and Pitru Yajna, Brahma Yajna, and Manushya Yajna, and Bhuta Yajna. So the Bhuta Yajna is about the ecology and the balance and sustainability. Okay, it's about taking care of other beings. So if you have a few minutes more, you can read this in detail. If you don't have the few minutes more, I summarized it for you here. Okay, the entire thing, this in my blog, I'll post it here. So basically, these are the 5 things that we need to do according to the Taittiriya Aranyaka, and there is a reason for this. It's explained pretty well, and what you could do and things like that. So I request you from the perspective of what Vivek shared with us today, please think about Bhuta Yajna in terms of what we would do and how that would fit into your own lifestyle, individual lifestyle, and what changes you would like to make. That's all I want to say. And thank you so much for everyone for all your interest. It's not about milk. It's about, being in balance, in harmony with Mother Earth.
Thanks,
Well
Rajesh.
said, Rajesh.
Thanks,
Well said,
Rajesh. Thanks,
Thank
Vivek.
you.
Thank you, Rajesh.
Thank
And
you.
thank you, Vivek,
Thank
for
you.
this interesting discussion.
Thank you,
Thanks,
everyone.
everyone.
Thank you all.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Bye.
Thank you, everybody.
Bye.
Very interesting
Bye.
discussion.